Hi, welcome to Lockdown Lessons Live. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are. I'm Toby, and today we're going to be looking specifically at writing. I've been having some technical issues before today's call. Not call, everything feels like a phone call these days. Before the film today, and for some reason the camera was focusing all over this part of my head. In fact, this was the only thing that you could see on screen. And, I'm bald and it's something that I have to accept. But to see a whole entire screen of this portion of my head was pretty difficult to deal with. But hopefully you can see the other parts of my face now. Today we're going to be looking at how to become a better writer. And we're going to be exploring some methods as to how to become a better writer, and hopefully it will be useful to you. So let's kick off with the first important question. When thinking about how to become a better writer, we must ask, what makes a good reader? That seems strange, but it's an important question to ask. What do good readers do? What do good readers do? How do they read? Can you answer in the chat, please, guys? The first question today then is, what do good readers do? And this will really help us understand what good writers need to do to elicit that response. It is strange to be thinking about reading when we're trying to become better writers, but it's really important. Writing is communication through the page. You have your writer on the one hand writing the words, and then you have your reader, unknown to the writer, invisible to the writer, doing the reading. And they're entirely in charge of what they think and what they feel. But amazing writers are able to write something and it makes the reader feel something. And I think that is controlled in many ways by the writer. It is important as a writer to think about how the reader will think and how the reader might react. So in our lessons so far, we have a plan for reading and reading metaphors. So here it is. This is what we do. We separate the real from the unreal. We explore the unreal in isolation and we draw our conclusions. So that's our method. But how can we make readers do that are invisible to us, that are maybe many miles away? This is a question that I'm sure all writers have asked themselves tirelessly. That even if they've written a whole script, a whole book, and they must think, what are the readers going to do with this? How are they going to be able to imagine? Is it going to work for them? And that's an interesting word as well, work. As writers, we need to make the readers, work a little, but we need to make this science work a little. The writer's write on the page, and the reader, invisible to the writer, must read and imagine. So reading is central to writing. In fact, I think they're almost exactly the same thing. And reading is pretty complicated. So I'll talk about that in just a second. But when we're reading a metaphor, we have our step-by-step guide, which is we find a metaphor and we, for instance, the sky was made of iron. We separate the real from the unreal, so the sky can't be made of iron. Then we explore that unreal in isolation, and then we draw our conclusions. It's very much a step-by-step guide to our invisible readers, but we can't make them do it. We have to do something else. So today's lesson is about becoming a better writer, and there are some techniques that hopefully will be useful to you today. And before we get stuck into that, what we have to do is we have to make the reader imagine. And what do good readers do? Well, good readers spark the imagination. They spark the reader's imagination and they don't burn the house down. So good writers spark the imagination and don't burn the house down. Good readers imagine. They do it very naturally. If you're reading a really good book, and I'm sure many of you have, it's like you're there in the action. Sometimes it can be almost addictive, good reading, but it's pretty hard. Reading is two things. So my question before, what do good readers do? If you can note that in the chat, that'd be very helpful. What do good readers do? Have a think. What do they do? What is their behaviour? How do they act? And I just want to explain something about reading, which has always fascinated me, and it's this. Reading is two things. Reading is two things. Reading, we read for information, certainly, but reading is also decoding. Like at the beginning, we've always talked about language being a code. Reading is decoding. And so if you take this word, toilets, you might see this when we're allowed to go and walk around our towns and cities. You might see that sign, and it means that there are the toilets. It's a pretty good sign, and it functions really well. I'm not suggesting that the person that wrote that sign is by any stretch a good writer, but it's doing what it needs to do, isn't it? It's telling us that's where the toilets are. But when we're writing stories and ideas on the page, we need readers to do something else. We need readers to imagine, to visualize, to think, join connections together. And it is a very complicated and almost completely mysterious process. When great writers write, readers imagine beautifully. There's something about the way that writers construct their ideas and make those readers think a whole range of things. So, Chloe, you're absolutely right. Every reader would react differently with their own imagination to a book. I think I agree 50%. I think everybody has their own interpretation of things. Maybe I agree perhaps a bit more than 50%. But it is strange how great writers make us think about different ideas. So this book here, a fantastic work of art by George Orwell, Animal Farm, that book makes a lot of people feel and think similar things about power and the abuse of power. And great writers somehow are able to control their readers a bit. If we go on 50%, then perhaps Chloe will agree with me. But I think certainly that great writers can control readers and control what they think. And this is what this lesson's all about, how to control a reader and how to improve our writing. So as readers, as I've said, we have a step-by-step process. We've got our metaphor plan, and we also have other plans and other processes that you can see on other videos. But when we read, we want to imagine, and our process, our step-by-step guide helps you do that. So if we look at the first poem, this is a very beautiful work of art and one of my favourites. This is Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. So what I want us to do is when we read this, have a look and see where the metaphors are. Where is the impossible? Metaphors are always impossible. So have a look where they are and then try and go through that 3-step process. Okay, so I'll read it and see if you can find the metaphors and then perhaps think about what is meant by them. So this is Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. nothing gold can stay. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. Where are the metaphors there? Where is the impossible? And what do they imply? Have a think. Where are the metaphors there? And what do they imply? It's worth remembering, of course, that this poem is deceptive, as often all poetry is, because what is written about isn't necessarily what the poem is about. And certainly that's the reaction of students I've taught in the past. What's this about? It doesn't make sense. Poets never mean what they say. And I probably would agree. So here, in this poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay, we have a range of metaphors. Nature's first green is gold. Yeah, thank you, Chloe. After autumn, you start finding trees with green on, so it's like finding gold. Yeah, absolutely. It also could be that the leaves themselves are golden, but certainly that's right. The leaves being gold is that metaphor. Obviously, those leaves are not gold. If they were gold, they would fall very heavily from the tree because gold is a metal. I know that seems like quite a silly thing to say, but leaves are not made of gold, but they simply look like gold. And with our metaphor process that we have, you can disseminate that metaphor and take things from it. So gold might suggest, let's have a look at the poem again, something that is rich, something that is treasured, something that is precious, and that helps us read the metaphor. Autumn, this poem seems to me to be absolutely about autumn, and it's about that autumn being brief. Nothing gold can stay. When the leaves fall from the trees and autumn is in full flood, and then to winter, autumn disappears. So what then is this poem about? In one sense, Robert Frost is definitely telling us about autumn, but is that all he's telling us about? Nothing gold can stay. He finishes the poem with, we'll see if you can write in the chat, please. Nothing gold can stay is about autumn, but perhaps it's about something else as well. Leaf subsides to leaf, her hardest hue to hold. What is that poem about if it's not just about autumn? While you have a think about that, I'd like to show you another poem. This one is a little more subtle, and this is Tall Nettles by Ebba Thomas. Tall nettles. Tall nettles cover up, as they have done, these many springs, the rusty harrow, the plough, long worn out, and the roller made of stone. Only the elm butt tops the nettles now. The corner of the farmyard I like most, as well as any bloom upon a flower. I like the dust on the nettles, never lost, except to prove the sweetness of a shower. What's that about then? So, that poem is about nettles, very clearly, and Robert Frost's poem is all about autumn, but is it? Let's just take this idea here. This one. We have to spark the reader's imagination. not burn the house down. I was thinking this is a good idea, a good comparison. As writers, we need to make the reader think and feel. We need to make them imagine. And it's quite possible that if the writing is too instructive, it won't make us think at all. If we take the amazing toilets, we know if we see a sign that says toilets, that's where the toilets are. It doesn't really require any greater thought, any greater imagination, but it's just simply telling the reader where those toilets are. But if you want your reader to think amazing things, you're going to want them to think a little bit more. So you have to hold that information back. Holding something back is the key to writing well. So if you want your reader to think about something like, well, nothing beautiful lasts forever, you might write a poem about autumn and precious leaves being on a tree and then disappearing quickly. Certainly, Robert Frost's poem is about autumn. You can see nature's first green as gold, her hardest hue to hold. But only so an hour. How brief and quick autumn is. But certainly, when it comes to Edward Thomas' poem, what could that suggest? What could that imply? Nettles are pretty mean. Living in Cornwall, I often go for walks with my kids, and my dog, who seems to be quite brave, manages to go almost head first into nettles, and they don't seem to cause him any pain. But certainly, I remember my daughter falling into nettles, and she gets those. She got some red lumps and blisters on her arm, and in dreadful pain. We've all been stung by nettles, and they grow in abundance in gardens that perhaps are uncared for, or in hedgerows, and we're wary of them. But this poem isn't about being wary of nettles, but about being something else. What could this mean? He says at the end, I like the dust on nettles, never lost, except to prove the sweetness of a shower. An amazing adjectival phrase there. The sweetness of a shower. It's amazing to think that that's what he's focusing in on. Nettles, the thing that perhaps many of us think are, well, painful, and to stay away from. Here is somebody finding beauty in something considered ugly, or something that is commonplace. And maybe his poem is about nettles, but it's also about beauty in places that you don't expect, or in things that perhaps are considered ugly, or beauty in unlikely places. And that seems to be a very positive message. And that's what writers do. They take an idea as simple as autumn leaves on a tree or nettles in a farmyard, and they make the reader think about those things and perhaps their bigger, deeper meaning. And this is a technique. It's a technique used in writing, and it's one that I want to teach you today. So I'd like you to spark the reader's imagination and give them some information as to your idea. What could your idea be? Could it be like Robert Frost's idea that beauty only lasts momentarily? Or Edward Thomas's idea that beauty is found in unlikely places? And then, and this really is the trick, find an object to represent this idea that you're trying to show. I picked up George Orwell's Animal Farm a minute ago. And Animal Farm is a story about pigs and horses and sheep, and they represent the danger of power and how imprisoning power can be. So Orwell chose animals. Frost chose autumn, a season, to talk about how brief beauty is. Edward Thomas chose a nettle to talk about how beauty is found in unlikely places. So choose an object, and this is called the objective correlative. Think of an object that you could write about in a poem and simply describe it. It doesn't have to be a poem, it could be a small example of prose, but think of an object and try and explain that object with your idea in mind without saying, for instance, you could choose a coat, an old coat, and describe it. This could have real symbolism. It could be a grandparent that perhaps who had the coat, and there could be meaning in that. It could be an old boot, a watch, a picture frame, a guitar. It could be a whole range of different things, and you simply describe that thing with your bigger idea in mind. This is how good writing is done. We don't tell the reader that, for instance, pain can be isolating, or beauty's hard to find, or luck is difficult, or any of these ideas. And you think about these ideas, and then you describe an object: a cup, a coat, a hat, a broken plant pot, a dog, a pen, and you use this object to symbolize those things. Have a look around you now. Have a look around you. A plant pot, an old picture, a relative, a ukulele I can see, a painting, a guitar on the wall. What could these things symbolize? Because they all do. Things have emotional attachment, and poetry and good writing aims at making the reader feel an emotion. This is quite complicated stuff, but that's how it's done. The writer communicates through the page to the reader, and they make the reader imagine. I'm going to show the toilet sign again. That doesn't make us imagine. None of us, if we see that word, we don't think about the different shapes and sizes of the toilet. But when you take a poem whose idea is more hidden, then suddenly the reader gets a chance to imagine that idea that I suggested of sparking the reader's imagination. You have to give the reader just enough to be able to feel, not give them too much. So great art, great literature is about the secret emotions that we have. And I'm just thinking if I can... So yeah, I mean, here Philip Larkin's, much of his poetry is about the fear of dying, actually. Much of his poem is about the fear of dying. He's quite a negative guy. But many of his poems, in one famous poem, he writes about a tortoise. And this tortoise encapsulates these feelings of being afraid of death, and etc., etc. So he's taken the tortoise to encapsulate. So take an object and describe it. Think about something that's in your heart and try and communicate it by not telling the reader what to think. We must never tell the reader what to think. We just create the conditions. We create the conditions. We show the reader the atmosphere of emotion, the atmosphere of feeling. We just don't tell them. Because as soon as we say, for instance, a poem about autumn, the leaves fall off the tree, and that reminds me that the things we love disappear quickly, that's a bit too in the face. It's a bit too obvious. And when you do something like that, it burns the house down. It's too direct. Great writers are not direct, but they create the conditions of emotion. And art does the same. And it's an amazing thing to be able to communicate. So many of us, I think, carry our emotions with us when we write about them in a way that is interesting to a reader. It certainly helps the way we think and the way we feel, and perhaps in this lockdown, our mental health. I love writing music, and I love writing too, and it makes me feel happier when I do that. It is an expression that really helps positivity in a time where there is a lot of negative things around. Writing things down, even Larkin said with all his negativity that writing is an immeasurably positive act. So the task is write a poem or a piece of prose and describe an object, a random object, and think about the emotion that you want to express and try to explain that part plot or that cup with that emotion in mind. Here's some other hints and tricks for great writing. I've said it before. Abstract nouns like hope, joy, grief, and love, you need to never write down. As soon as you've done that, you tell the reader. So if you want to write a poem about hope, choose a plant pot, choose a cup, choose a pen. Pens are immensely helpful. And describe that pen. Describe what it might do. Describe its capacity to keep on going. And when you take an idea and you explore it without revealing, then you really start to write, and the reader really starts to imagine. And that's the task. So have a look at these poems again. Nothing Gold Can Stay and Tall Nettles, perhaps when this video's over, and have a look at how they do it. Certainly Nothing Gold Can Stay uses a lot of rhyme. Gold and hold, flower and hour, leaf and grief and day and stay. And Robert Frost is known for doing this. He loved a rhyme. So if you feel like using a rhyme, then use a rhyme. Equally, poems, particularly poems, have a rhythm. Nature's first green is gold. There is something that is quite addictive to rhythm. So while you're writing, try to maybe beat out a rhythm. Nature's first green is gold. Maybe just take that from Robert Frost. But crucially, and this really is the best advice I can offer, when you're trying to express something that is deep, that is the heart's truth, don't tell the reader. Don't tell the reader what to feel. Give them the conditions. Don't burn the house down. Find an object and describe it. In fact, these two poems are not so unrelated. Nothing Gold Can Stay was written by Robert Frost, who happened to be Edward Thomas' best friend. Edward Thomas wrote Tall Nettles, I think, in 1917, and 10 years later, Robert Frost wrote Nothing Gold Can Stay. Sadly, Edward Thomas died in the war 10 years before, and Robert Frost lost his best friend, and you can see that suddenly He was right. Nothing gold can stay, nothing beautiful lasts forever. So that's my very best advice, and it'll take some time, practice, but you'll get there. Remember, writing is an immensely positive, it's an incredibly positive and liberating act, especially now. And try to find an object and describe it without revealing that secret emotion. And when you do that, readers will be able to really think and feel. So thanks ever so much for coming along to today's lesson. You can catch up on the lessons that on our YouTube page. There's a series already there. You can follow us on our Facebook page, and you can check out what we're doing on our Instagram and on our crowdfunder page. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch and contact us at lockdownlessons@skoolcornwall.com. Hope you're safe and well, and we'll see you for a lesson tomorrow. Okay, all the best. Take care. Bye.